Good morning, all of you. Welcome to today's analysis session for 27th of June 2023. So we are getting everyday updates from the developments from the state of Manipur. So here the issue is internal stability of states. So center will ensure execution of pact with Kukis. So Kukis are tribal community in the state of Manipur and they reside in the hilly regions. So Kuki insurgent groups, they violated ground rules of SOO agreement and that has been alleged by the Chief Minister of Manipur. So officials, they say withdrawal of ASFA is hindering operations. So here, quoting the words of the Chief Minister, so the Home Minister said that center will provide maximum support to implement the ground rules applicable to SOO groups. So SO is the suspension of operations agreement that was signed with the Kuki insurgent groups in the hill areas. So this pact requires the insurgent groups to remain in designated camps with weapons under lock and key. So here, obviously, we have discussed in detail about the proper history about how the events unfolded, what caused the violent situation in the state of Manipur. We have discussed about the ethnic composition of the state. Then deadline to apply for the higher PF pension extended to July 11. So Employees Provident Fund Organization, you can find out about the basics about it. So it is extended the deadline for the employees and pensioners to apply for the higher PF pension till July 11. So you need to know about that whether pension is a capital expenditure or a revenue expenditure. And then you can know about little trend about how the things have been changing. So with this, employees and pensioners, they will get 15 more days to submit the joint option forms. And this is the last opportunity for them as per the EPFO. So National Medical Commission, it has withdrawn the recently issued graduate medical education regulations for MBBS admission. So guidelines, they were issued on 12th of June. They included the new rules on competency-based medical education curriculum, recruitment of manpower for the research facilities in medical colleges, admission of the students under the disabled category, and format for submission of information for the admissions. So here in the state of Punjab, withdraw the Sikh Gurudwaras bill or gear up to face the stir as per the SGPC. So the Shiromani Gurudwara Prabandhak Committee, it passed a resolution condemning the Punjab government's interference in the Sikh Gurudwaras Act of 1925 at a special general session, which was held in Amritsar. So here the state government and the body responsible for the management of the Gurudwaras, they have been at loggerheads since 20th of June when the State Assembly passed this Sikh Gurudwaras Amendment Bill 2023, which is aimed at freeing the rights to telecast Gurbani from the Golden Temple. So Gurbani broadcast rights, they are granted by the SGPC and they are currently with G Next Media, which is owned by Shiromani Akali Dal Chief Sukhbir Singh Badal. So basically, here we can say the powers of basically the power of SGPC, which it used to grant the Gurbani broadcast rights, it has been granted by the state government. So that is the whole issue here. So today is MSME Day. So here, MSME entrepreneurs, for your contribution to the nation, here we have this advertisement for them. So definitely, no doubt, MSME sector is very important. It's an important topic from economy and also for those who have economics optional. So you need to know about how the MSME sector it is growing in India, what are different legislations for them, what are different kind of schemes and policies for the MSME sector, and obviously the basics like what are different categories on the basis of which we categorize them into medium, small, and micro enterprises. So that's there. Coming to the editorial page. So here, so India and Egypt, they have re-established close ties in recent years. So obviously it is about India-Egypt relationship, the challenges which exist and some progress that have been made. And obviously we've been tracing it from the history. So the decision by India and Egypt to upgrade their ties to a strategic partnership. So this is one development during this recent visit of the Indian Prime Minister. That is definitely a significant move for India's ties with the West Asia North Africa region, which is called WANA region. That is long overdue given their historical ties. So the two countries they signed the Friendship Treaty in 1955 and India's support to Egypt, including during the Suez Canal crisis in 1956, that led to the non-line movement in 1961, and with both as the founder members of it. So there were also instrumental in the G77 grouping. You need to know about the G77 and then obviously in the South-South cooperation also. So during the Cold War, India and Egypt, they were united over their desire not to become the camp followers of either the US or the Soviet Union. So even at that point of time, we were on the same page. And more recently, their positions on the Ukraine war, they have been extremely similar. Like we've been refusing them either and calling for a diplomatic resolution. So like obviously India is not, very clearly or, we have not outspoken our or not given our support to one side of this war. We are basically trying to balance our interest on both the sides, and we demand for a diplomatic resolution to this problem. So last year, India's decision to supply wheat to Egypt, which is one of the world's biggest importers, that was hit by the blockade on exports from Russia and Ukraine. Before the Black Sea Grain Initiative stepped in, it won New Delhi much goodwill in the Cairo. So this was one important step. And two sides are also pursuing closer cooperation in the green energy sector, also in pharmaceuticals and then defense. So we have signed MOUs in agriculture, archaeology, and antiquities, and competition law as well. So these are some of the other developments. And then the president of Egypt, he was also the chief guest at India's Republic Day celebrations this year. So he has conferred the Egypt's highest state honor, which is called the Order of the Nile, the Prime Minister Modi, and it is given to world leaders and those who offer Egypt or humanity invaluable service. So in this case, the Order of Nile is conferred upon the dignitaries. So both the sides, they have spent time focusing on multilateral issues as well. India's close ties in Egypt's neighborhood, especially Israel and Saudi Arabia, food and energy security constraints, building more cooperation with the global south, including the African Union. African Union again is very important topic then. And in March, Egypt, it also joined the new development bank, which is set up by BRICS. And it is keen to join this grouping that will deliberate the new memberships at its summit in the Cape Town this August. So this is another topic which is related to BRICS about its expansion and including more countries. So that's there. So bolstered by the historical ties and buffeted by the present day geopolitical turmoil, it is clear that India and Egypt are now essaying a closer relationship, one that looks both at the future economies and autonomous foreign policies. So these are the keywords. So foundation for a future ready digital India. So what will form the foundation? That is one important thing that need to come to your mind, that what all things they need to be in place when we talk about digital India, and how certain steps that have already been taken, how they are functioning and how they are faring. So that's there. And obviously the topic is in news because of this digital India bill, which is an obviously which will be presented in the monsoon session, the parliament. And yesterday also we took up this topic. So the basics of it, basically the basic features of this bill, they became important. So why the present digital India, basically present regime is untenable. So the current IT Act, which was enacted in 2000, it defines an intermediary to include any entity between a user and the internet. And the IT rules, they subclassify intermediaries into three main categories of social media intermediaries. Then you have significant social media intermediaries, and recently we've notified the online gaming intermediaries. So here, basically, when we talk about the social media intermediaries platforms, they facilitate the communication and sharing of information between the users. Then, when we talk about the social media intermediaries, they have a very large user base. Obviously, that's there, and the ones with very large user base, they have been designated as the significant social media intermediaries. So obviously here we will have examples like Facebook and WhatsApp. So however, when we look at the definition of social media intermediaries, it is so broad that it can encompass a variety of services like video communications, matrimonial websites also, and email, and even online comment sections on websites. So you need to be clear with the definition that is provided in this IT Act, for the social media intermediaries, because that is the current legislation that we have. Then we have some other type of social media platforms like Microsoft Teams or the Zoho. So here they like have the license where these intermediaries, they have closed user base, and that's why they present a lower risk of harm from information going viral. So obviously you can't treat them like the conventional social media platforms. So even like that is one problem area, and it only adds to their cost of doing business, but also exposes them to greater liability without meaningfully reducing the risks which is presented by the internet. So that is one challenge in the current regime. And so far, only a handful of the countries, they have taken a clear position on this issue of proportionate regulation of the intermediaries. So this is very, very important subtopic of it, and there is not too much to lean on. So the European Union Digital Services Act, it is probably one of the most developed frameworks for us to consider. So we can like have a few learnings from this act, and it introduces some exemption and creates three tiers of intermediaries, like the hosting services, online platforms, and very large online platforms. So these are three different categories as per this European Union's Digital Services Act. Then Australia, it has also created an eightfold classification system with separate industry drafted codes governing categories like social media platforms and search engines. So intermediaries, they're required to conduct risk assessments based on the potential for exposure to the harmful content such as child sexual abuse material or terrorism. So focus areas for India, what are going to be the focus areas for India? So while a granular product specific classification, it could improve accountability and safety online, such an approach, it may not be future proof. But like you're talking about the product specific classification. So no doubt it would be helping us in accountability and safety online, but again, this is not future proof. So technology as it is evolving, the specific categories we define today, they may not work in future because obviously technology is evolving. We might be having new challenges tomorrow. So, defining it category wise, that is a difficult task, and obviously we can't be just focusing on this thing and changing the definitions every then and now. So what we need there was a classification framework that creates a few defined categories, and it requires intermediaries to undertake the risk assessment also, and uses that information to bucket them into relevant categories. So that can be one approach going forward. And as far as possible, the goal should also be to minimize the obligations on the intermediaries and ensure that regulatory asks are proportionate to their ability and size. So these are some of the suggestions. And one way to do this would be to exempt the micro and the small enterprises and caching and conduit services like the pipes of the internet from any major obligations, and clearly distinguish communication services from other forms of intermediaries, such as the search engines and online marketplaces. So we need to have this distinction also for more clarity. And given the lower risk, the obligations placed on intermediaries that are not communication services, that should be lesser, but they could still be required to appoint a grievance officer, incorporate with the law enforcement, and identify advertising and take down problematic content within reasonable timelines. And then the largest communication services platforms, they could then, like, they can also adhere to the special obligations for them, like appointing India based officers and setting up in-house grievance appellate mechanisms with independent external stakeholders to increase confidence in grievance process. So that would be much more effective. And alternative approaches to curbing virality, such as the circuit breakers to slow down the content, that could also be considered. So the keyword is curbing virality. So for the proposed approach to be effective, whatever like reforms and suggestions have been suggested, I know that they're very important. So you can note them down at one place, or you can take a screenshot as per your convenience. So here, all these proposed approach, in order to become much more effective, metrics for the risk assessment and appropriate thresholds would have to be defined and reviewed on periodic basis in consultation with the industry. So overall, such a framework, it could help establish accountability and online safety while reducing legal obligations for a large number of intermediaries. And in doing so, it could help create a regulatory environment that helps achieve the government's policy goals of creating a safer internet ecosystem while also allowing business to thrive. So the month of June with extremes in temperature, so maximum temperature, it hit the lowest mark in Chennai and highest in Thiruvananthapuram. So you can see it's all because of the climate change we're seeing. So blowing hot and cold. We have the data as well. Understanding the Wagner mutiny. So this is again an important topic here. We also have the map. So let's see what are the potential questions that this article is dealing with. So what led Russia into an unprecedented internal security crisis? Although like we have taken up it yesterday, so few aspects have been covered yesterday. Next is, why was the chief of Wagner private military company involved in this? And how did Russian president he deal with this situation? And has the whole incident exposed Putin's loosening authority or not? So that is the most important thing. So here we saw Wagner Group tribunal of mercenaries. So obviously you need to start with the basics. What actually is Wagner Group and where like it is having role in different countries or not. So that is there. And Prigozhin, he's a short-lived mutiny against Russia's defense established showcase Mr. Putin's weakening authority. So it is pointing towards the weakening authority of Vladimir Putin through this mutiny that was clearly evident. So understanding this map, let me zoom it further. So here you can see this is Crimea and this is the Black Sea in blue color. So here we have the orange color shaded area is under the Russia's control. Here we have important regions located in Ukraine, the capital Kyiv, Kharkiv, it is here, Bamuk, Donetsk, Sevastopol would be somewhere around here, and Rostov-on-Don is the area where Wagner Group it was approaching. So on 24th of June, Prigozhin halts the convoy and saying he wants to avoid shedding the Russian blood at this position at Krasno. So basically, they had marched from Rostov on Don till here, and from here, they basically announced a reversal, and they were like obviously few distance away from the capital of Russia, that is Moscow. So it could have obviously led to another kind of turmoil in the geopolitical situation and obviously the security and the stability of Russia. So what happened on June 24th, this we've already seen yesterday. Why did he basically the Prigozhin launch the mutiny? So Prigozhin basically you're talking about the Wagner group. Why did it launch this mutiny against Russia's president, or we can say Russia? So the crisis between Wagner chief and the Russia's Ministry of Defense, it has been brewing up for quite some time. Mr. Prigozhin, he's a former Kremlin contractor and close ally of Mr. Putin, accused the Ministry of Defense leadership of corruption and incompetence. So earlier signs of the feud they were visible in February, also weeks after the Wagner it captured Soldar, which is a small salt mining town in Donetsk, when Mr. Prigozhin said that the ministry had limited the supply of arms and ammunition for the Wagner, whose forces were on the front lines in the Bakhmut region. So that was basically the beginning. And Wagner it took Bakhmut in late May, and after one of the bloodiest battles of the 21st century. So we can say Wagner Group is in the lead, and according to Prigozhin, the Wagner had lost some 20,000 men in the battle and 5 times more guys than had been supposed to have died. So he appeared in a video from the captured city and said that Minister of Defense leadership should be held responsible for their actions. Capture of Bakhmut seemed to have strengthened Mr. Prigozhin's standing, and it also intensified the feud between Ministry of Defense of Russia and the Wagner Group. So he said his forces came under fire while retreating from Bakhmut, and Wagner arrested one Russian regular serviceman and killed him also. So crisis it came into open on 10th of June, and that was when the defense minister of Russia he issued an order asking all the armed volunteers to sign contracts with the Minister of Defense of Russia before July 1. So it was an attempt to bring the Wagner's remaining 25,000 forces under the defense ministry's command of Russia. So that is what urged Mr. Prigozhin, and he decided to march towards Moscow. So what is next? We know about what is the deal and right now what is the situation. So for Mr. Putin, however, this whole crisis, it poses several challenges for him. So the mutiny itself, it was an implosion of the feud between the strongmen of his security circles. So for a long time, he tolerated the feud, but Saturday's developments showed his inability to stop it from escalating into public fighting. So Mr. Prigozhin also set an example of challenging Russia's state institutions and walking away freely, something that's unheard of in Mr. Putin's Russia and could have echoes in the future as well. So whole incident exposed Mr. Putin's weakening authority, and after promising to quell the rebellion on TV, what he did was to talk to mercenaries indirectly and pardon them in return for their retreat. So he may have averted an immediate crisis as of now in the short term, but the reasons for the mutiny, like that includes Russia's poor battlefield performance, internal feud, and corruption allegations that remains unaddressed. So if the war drags on further without any concrete result, Mr. Putin could face more challenges from within in future. So here, another thing that we have taken up before is how India is taking up this thing and what are the potential impacts or the possible impacts on India. India's defense minister, he criticizes Obama's remarks on minority rights in India. And he says that he basically reminded him of the many Muslim countries he has attacked, referring to the war on terror during the Democratic leader's tenure at the White House. So Obama ji should not forget that India is the only country which considers all the people living in the world as family members. Just talking about our principal Vasudev Kutumbakam. So it is a recognition of India's prowess. It's a recognition of India's position, the geopolitics order. And earlier during such visits, the talks were about Kashmir and Pakistan. So the primary focus this time was technological progress. This is fundamental change in our relationship. So such incidences of people or man urinating in the airlines, in the airplanes have been increasing. So this can be one of the case studies. So misconduct, it was observed by the cabin crew and a verbal warning was issued and the passenger was secluded from the surrounding passengers by the cabin supervisor. So accused has been arrested under sections 294, which is obscene acts and songs, 510, which is misconduct in the public by a drunken person of the Indian Penal Code, and he was later released on bail by the police. So hundreds have been stranded as flash flood and landslips disrupt Himachal's highways. So that is also like with more rainfall, with the loosening of the soil, we are seeing incidences of landslides these days. So hundreds of commuters, including the tourists, they were stranded in Mandi district of Himachal Pradesh. As Chandigarh Manali National Highway, it was blocked following flash floods and landslips. Coming to the world page. So here 14 civilians have been killed in fight for the police headquarters in Sudan's capital. So we know about the war which is going on in Sudan. So you need to know about the proper geography of this region, important water bodies and rivers that flow through Sudan, if any, the surrounding countries, whether it is a landlocked country or not. And then obviously you need to know about the reasons behind this war. So again, we are having a statement from Prigozhin. So he issues a defined statement as uncertainty swirls after this mutiny. So Wagner chief denied trying to attack the Russian state and said he acted in response to an attack on his force that killed some 30 of his fighters. And the defense minister of Russia was seen in a helicopter and then meeting with the officers. So NATO chief again, he also has to say something on this Wagner group's mutiny towards Russia. So Wagner mutiny shows Russia's invasion of Ukraine was a strategic mistake. So he said that weakened mutiny by the mercenary troops in Russia showed that Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine was a mistake, and basically said we are also monitoring the situation in Russia. Events over the weekend, they are an internal Russian matter and yet another demonstration of the big strategic mistake that Putin made with his illegal annexation of Crimea also and the war against Ukraine. So Lithuania has been mentioned, so you can like find out about the exact location. So it will be hosting next month's NATO summit. So that's why he's on a visit to Lithuania. Obviously, it is not a good thing also because Russia, it can go into the phase of instability because of any more like further progress or developments against Russia. So it's also something that is to be taken into account. Most important conclusion is that the war against Ukraine launched by Putin and the monster that Putin created with Wagner, the monster is biting him. So basically it is backfiring on Russia itself. So Sri Lanka is going to restructure its domestic debt amid challenges. So we know about the economic situation in Sri Lanka. So it will shut down its banks and the financial sector for 5 days ahead of an extraordinary weekend debate in the parliament and the government's plan to restructure the domestic debt. And this moves, it comes after Sri Lanka decided to suspend servicing its foreign debt to combat a devastating economic meltdown, and the government subsequently entered an agreement with the IMF and secured nearly $3 billion of package while agreeing to restructure both its foreign and the domestic debt. That fund estimated at about $41 billion and $42 billion respectively. So in May, the IMF pointed to tentative signs of improvement in Sri Lanka while underscoring the need for timely restructuring agreements with the island's creditors ahead of the fund's first review scheduled in September. So what has been the role of India in aiding Sri Lanka is an important area for us. So here, India has repeatedly emphasized creditor parity among the bilateral lenders. Japan and the Paris Club have echoed the sentiment, while China has demanded that multilateral creditors be brought into the same process. Meanwhile, it remains to be seen how the private creditors who hold the largest chunk of Sri Lanka's foreign debt by way of international sovereign bonds, how they are going to participate. So the bilateral creditors, they are waiting for China to come on board, and China's insistence that multilateral creditors be subject to the same treatment. So Sri Lanka's foreign debt restructure process appears effectively deadlocked for the moment. So S&P firm says that India will be the fastest growing economy in Asia Pacific. Retail inflation is likely to soften to 5% this fiscal from 6.7%, and RBI is expected to cut the interest rates early next year, according to S&P. So according to Bank of International Settlements, the world is at critical point in inflation fight. So we know about inflation, the challenge in different economies, but it is obviously again, the challenge is again in controlling the inflation, but the situation is different. Different economies, be it like the European economies of Germany, or when we talk about the US, and obviously it is different in India. So possibility of further problems in the banking sector, it was now like material, warned the BIS Bank. So Bank for International Settlements has called for more interest rate increases, warning the world economy was now at a crucial point as countries they struggle to rein in inflation. And despite relentless rise in the rates, over the last 18 months, we still see inflation in many top economies remains stubbornly high. So there's this problem of sticky inflation. While the jump in the borrowing cost, it triggered the most serious banking collapse since the financial crisis 15 years ago. We saw that almost three banks failed in US. So global economy is at a critical juncture right now. So the time to obsessively pursue the short-term growth is past. So monetary policy must now restore price stability. So even in India, we are seeing that although inflation is moderating right now, and obviously RBI, the Monetary Policy Committee, is also focusing upon the still maintains how inflation developments are going about because we want a sustainable growth ahead. So US and European Union slowed down to hit almost 20% of the small firms. So 1 in 5 MSMEs will also see stretched working capital. So small businesses, which account for almost 40% of the exports, they will face headwinds from the imminent economic slowdown in advanced countries, particularly US and Eurozone, according to Crystal Ratings. So India and China to buoy their oil demand. So Saudi Aramco, it believes the market fundamentals remain sound for the second half as demand from emerging markets led by China and India will offset the recession risk in developed markets. So here the role of developing countries becomes important, and that's there. So even in the developed world also we were expecting like a major kind of recession. So if, like that is not the situation right now. So we can say that is short-term relief as of now, but we don't know whether like it can be one of the most serious or we can say deep recession in future. So we need to be prepared for that as well. So you need to approach every game with a positive mentality. So the same it goes for even for the competitive examinations. Positive mentality is very important. And moving to the next newspaper. So coming to Financial Express newspaper, monsoon to cover country 10 days early. So we are getting positive signs even from how it's been performing till now. So yesterday also we saw that the amount of deficiency in rainfall that has been reducing. So that is kind of a good sign for us. And that would be like not letting inflation go up further or fluctuate more. So firstly, you need to know about what actually are white label ATMs. And now we are seeing that these are, they see red. Basically, number of players, they have halved since their financial 2014's debut. So having a look at the number of machines, the largest ATM deployers in Suru, basically, it is SBI, it has the largest number, followed by India One, Hitachi, HDFC, and then Tata. So SORU stands for semi-urban and the rural areas. So white label ATMs set up and operated by the non-banking entities made their debut in India in 2013-14 with much fanfare. So that is one of the key points, that they are operated, they are set up by the non-banking entities. So Reserve Bank of India, pursuing its ongoing goal of financial inclusion, gave licenses to 8 players to set up and operate the ATMs in predominantly semi-urban and the urban regions. So you need to know about the characteristics of the semi-urban and the rural regions. And apart from the white label ATMs, you need to know about the steps that have been taken by the government for financial inclusion. So that's there. And as you can see, like Hitachi, it is obviously a non-banking entity. They have their white label ATMs. India One is one of them, Tata. So like the non-banking entities can also set up these white label ATMs. So we are facing problems here because four of them like now are no longer present. So here the number of these companies, like four of them, they were only the players and participants, but they are now no longer there in this sector. And apart from that, RBI it is citing viability issues. And same year, RBI it also revoked the certificate of authorization of the Riddhi Siddhi balloons and AGS transactions technologies due to non-compliance with the regulatory requirements. So even the existing players, they have not been able to scale up that fast. So we are facing hurdles in scaling up the operations for the white label ATMs. So Alphabet bets on lasers to beam internet in the hard to reach areas. So that is one of the possible options. So Google parent and Airtel to scale up India deployment. So how Tara works. So traffic light sized machines beam laser carrying data, essentially the fiber optic internet without cables. So idea it emerged from the failed balloon internet project Loon, which used lasers to connect data between the balloons. So as per Airtel, Tara, it will also help deliver faster internet in the urban areas. It will be less expensive to beam data between buildings than to bury the cables. So Airtel and other partners, they use the machines to build communication infrastructure in the remote areas. So focusing on ethanol run vehicles. So this is also part of the green energy transition. So we are beginning new vehicles that will run entirely on ethanol, and scooters, they will run 100% on ethanol. So the Road Transport and Highways Minister says that I would launch a car in August, which will run 100% on ethanol, and it will also generate 40% electricity. So that's so amazing. Vehicle would also be generating that to the tune of 40% electricity, and it would be run on 100% ethanol. So in India, we are seeing demand resilience and investment momentum going forward. So that is basically keeping our growth sustainable and strong going ahead. So rain deficiency, it is now down to 23% only. And here we have the map. So the yellow regions have already been covered by monsoon so far. And northern limit of the monsoon as on 26 June is this. So this region still remains to be covered by it. So monsoon, the topic in itself is very important from the perspective of geography. So I need to find out about all that. And then the keywords, the key terms which are related to monsoon, like the Indian Ocean dipole and likewise. So again, we are seeing tomato prices scaling new highs. So they breach rupees 100 kg mark. So not let up soon as Mandi arrivals, they are down to a trickle. So that is obviously because of reduced supply, so demand supply mismatch. So at Delhi's Azadpur Mandi, tomato prices rose to rupees 1500 to 1600 per 25 kg bag on Monday. That used to be somewhere around 900 to 1000 a week ago. So we are having this top scheme also to control the prices of tomato, onion, and potatoes. So, but in case of like reduced supply, how can we help? The government intervenes in the form of ensuring more amount of supply in the market so that the prices they cool down. So delayed monsoon rains and higher temperature prevailed in the last 2 months have forced the farmers to cut the area of tomato cultivation and opt for other crops. So that is the reason. And food inflation is definitely one of the important areas to control the overall inflation. So the implementation of IND AS, which is the Indian version of the International Financial Reporting Standards, it will remain a challenge for some banks due to higher capital requirements, lack of adequate systems, processes, and the data. So this is because banks they would have to contend with the impact of an increase in provisioning on their overall loss absorption buffers. So experts they vary that banks they may end up reducing their capital ratios as a response to higher provisioning under it, and this will dent the ability of these entities to absorb unexpected asset quality stress. So here you need to have clarity about what do we actually mean by provisioning. So that is one important term related to banking. So difficult days ahead, banks would have to contend with the impact of an increase in provisioning on their overall loss absorption buffers. So you need to know about then the relation with like increased amount of provisioning and the impact on the money supply and the lending capacity of the bank. Then experts are also worried that banks they may end up reducing their capital ratios as a response to higher provisioning under it. Transition to it is a fairly cumbersome process for which one needs a significant amount of data that all banks may not have at the moment. And RBI in January issued a discussion paper on the implementation of the expected credit loss based provisioning by the banks. So that's there. And SEBI looks to beef up the legal strength. So need of the hour is that legal team is involved in adjudicating on the alleged violations, defending SEBI's decisions and appeals. So for that, it would be going ahead with this decision. So account aggregator ecosystem needs fine tuning. So currently there are banks where technical failures, they are large and all are not providing the information about that is even. So here the ecosystem, it has come a very long way. And in terms of the financial information users, we have over 200 members who are using the data. Having said that, it still has a long way to go. So the ecosystems, this we've seen, currently there are banks where technical failures, they are large and they're also not even providing information on that. So further, other kinds of institutions, including the non-financial ones, they also need to join the platform as currently only the banks, they are providing the information. So you need to like find out about the basic, what do we actually mean by the account aggregators. So the ecosystem that is being talking about. So here we just talked about the challenge and the problem. So you need to know about what needs to, what actually ecosystem is required for the successful functioning. Coming to Indian Express. Okay, so first let's take up the Mint newspaper. So in the Mint, we are seeing why the new chip projects their baby steps for India. So we know that uh, recently when we talk about the new developments between India and US, so semiconductor manufacturing is one of the areas where India and US, they will be cooperating. So we saw that US semiconductor firms like Micron, Applied Materials, and Lam Research, they've announced projects in India, fueling New Delhi's hopes of becoming a player in the global supply chain for these chips. So that is obviously one of the steps to reduce the dependence upon China. So is India now going to make its own chips or not? So not really. Like obviously it would take some time. And Micron's project is for the assembly, testing, and packaging, while Applied Materials, they will open an engineering center that will develop the components for chip manufacturing. And Lam Research, it has unveiled a virtual precision engineering training platform for the semiconductor engineers. So all of these, they are part of the process for making these semiconductors. So Micron comes after a chip is like first created using the lithography. So you can find out about more. And that is, it happens the fabrication plants, and they're also known as fabs. So the later, it is very expensive since they require specialized machinery, components, and equipments. And it needs a vast supply chain plus uninterrupted power and water. So these are some of the challenges, but it might be possible in future that India might be making its own semiconductor chips. So how will these projects they help India's goals? So assembly, testing, and packaging facilities they are a good first step. But such plans they can help build a supply chain for the advanced components, and that would be helping in attracting multiple small vendors as well. But setting up such a network, it may also attract a chip fab to India also once a more robust semiconductor assembly and packaging network that is set up. So that is like a good step as a beginner. So can it really help India geopolitically also or not? So that is one of the areas why, or one of the reasons why India has basically decided to, for further developments in the sector because of its geopolitical significance. Because right now the countries they are majorly dependent upon China for semiconductor chips. So countries that have chip making and assembly plants, they can gain significant strategic advantages and they can importantly de-risk from Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company. So right now it is a market share of 55%. So you can imagine, obviously, they would be enjoying some strategic advantages because of this. And given the geopolitical tensions involving China, dependence on Taiwan, it can prove fragile as well. So obviously, it would be creating much more jobs directly and indirectly both. And it is the assembly and the testing plants that will generate more jobs. So they also require engineers to be upskilled. So they need to like be scaling up, and India is already a key contributor to semiconductor design that lacks hardware engineers. So new facilities, they can help create that pool as well. So as per Bloomberg, RBI should not make frequent changes. It is talking about the interest rate changes. So central bank need not rush to ease the interest rates unless it is sure of stable low inflation regime as per a rate setter at the RBI's monetary policy panel. So here it's important for the RBI to achieve the inflation target of 4% in a sustainable way. And it is best to avoid frequent changes in the direction that would be disruptive to achieving both growth and the inflation goals. So obviously, MPC also maintains this stance and it is having kind of vigil on how inflation is developing. So coming to Indian Express newspaper. So here so in a meeting, in order to look at the situation, the developments in Manipur, so center directs opening of the supply lines in Manipur, and the meeting was chaired by the Prime Minister. So he's taking the stock and the steps which are required. So direction to ensure essential supplies reach the people of Manipur is a part of the steps being taken to restore peace in the state where ethnic clashes erupted in May. And the meeting, it followed an all-party meeting convened by the Union Home Minister to discuss the ground situation and measures that could be taken immediately. So obviously there can be two set of uh, steps which can be taken by the center, the immediate or the short-term steps, and some steps which would take some time to materialize, which would be the long-term steps. So Delhi's showpiece Deer Park is going to be shut down. Its deers they will be shifted. So that was a picnic spot with deer frolicking about a canvas for a photo shoot, a place where fireflies they would gather in the dead of the night. So the Deer Park in Delhi's Oscars, it has meant different things to different peoples. over its 55 years of existence, but now it is the end of a city institution as we know it. So the Central Zoo Authority in recent order cancelled the Deer Park's recognition as a mini zoo, effectively ordering its closure. So there are around 600 deers in this park, and they would be shifted to forest areas in Rajasthan and Delhi to augment their prey base. So one reason behind the shutting down is the overcrowding at the park, and its deer population has grown unchecked over the years because of the absence of a natural predator. So park, which houses deer, rabbits, and ducks, is an oasis of green amid the increasingly crowded neighborhoods abutting it. So since we are celebrating National International MSME Day today, so MSMEs no doubt they drive the country's socio-economic growth. So they play a vital role in driving the economic development and catalyzing innovation is the highlight of this year's International MSME Day, alongside banks' growing involvement in financially empowering the sector. So they serve as the backbone of any economy by contributing significantly to the economic growth and development, fostering entrepreneurship, innovation, and job creation. So you can just go through this article in detail. So the government's vision is of doubling the Indian economy to $5 trillion by 2025. So obviously here, role of MSMEs is going to be very important. And definitely, obviously, the role of MSMEs in supporting women and youth entrepreneurship and resilient supply chains cannot be ignored. So even banks are like they're now offering loans and credit facilities more openly to the MSMEs, enabling them to invest in infrastructure and machinery and expand their operations. So that's there. So the total Indian exports standing at 2.49% and 49.8% for these two financial respectively. So it is because of the MSME related product export share. So that is obviously helping us in driving the exports as well. So you can see different schemes of the government, Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, and you have the credit guarantee fund trust for the micro and small enterprises. It is providing collateral free credit to MSMEs. So additionally, the banking sector enables financial inclusion by offering MSMEs access to the formal banking channels, like they can open up their savings accounts, payment systems, and digital platforms, facilitating efficient transfers, transactions, and access to wider customer base. So multilateral development banks, they must address challenges of climate change and growth aspirations of the global south, else they will become irrelevant. So the author of this article is N.K. Singh. So he's the chairman of the 15th Finance Commission. So he says that for India, reforming these multilateral development banks would mean advocating voice of the global south. And it is the first attempt to lend coherence to a multiplicity of efforts and initiatives for strengthening these multilateral development banks. So it is expected to take a holistic approach on a wide range of issues and outlines a pragmatic implementable program that would be done by the expert group. And it proposes to submit two reports. So the first will be focusing on the issues of the vision, financial capacity, and modalities of funding it. And the second would be with the issues related to harnessing private capital, risk mitigation, optimally using the guarantees to leverage private capital, and hybrid innovative financing. So making these multilateral development banks more relevant for addressing 21st century challenges, it would contribute towards enhancing the human welfare. So what actually are these 21st century challenges? Then deeper integration with the multiple stakeholders, that is also crucial. And if they do not respond to these new challenges, they will become increasingly irrelevant and be substituted by other forms of cooperation. So we need to act with agility and speed. So right now, the new challenge is to broaden and mandate and vision to address the challenges of transboundary issues and opportunities connected with the climate change. So that needs to be one area of cooperation as far as these multilateral development banks are concerned. And we need a symbiosis of these two visions with these added dimensions to it. So of these four requires different modes of financing and methods to work. Then central to these issues is a need for matching the ability of these banks to finance these larger goals without reducing development financing. So we have seen that over the years, notwithstanding the far-reaching geopolitical challenges they've seen, like economic crisis and uncertainties, these banks have remained relevant as credible institutions to support the development of both MICs and LICs. So yet it is widely believed that these institutions are no longer suited in terms of the resources, their cultural ethos and methods to address the emerging challenges. So that's why they need to function accordingly, and these relate to the global public goods, climate change, and pandemics. So it's widely believed that these are in quagmire, trapped in their procedures, approach, and the methods of work, and reticent to the structural changes. So, given their technical knowledge, experience, and credibility in the financial sphere, they need to rediscover their role and the methods. So two traditional goals that have been shared by all these multilateral institutions includes eliminating poverty and fostering shared prosperity. But as we just saw, new dimensions about the challenges emerging from transboundary issues, the opportunities connected with the climate change, that also needs to be a part of their goal. Then the second issue is of an expanded need for finance and importantly, the sources of finance. So how do we secure these credible sources of finance to meet these enhanced challenges? So there's an overwhelming consensus on enhancing the lending capacities of multilateral institutions for that. So here, these multilateral development banks, they need to optimize their current balance sheets to create higher leverage from existing funds and to attract private capital. So private capital is going to play an important role. So there's also a need for creating an incentive structure and bringing changes to the current operating model of these banks. So broad and deep changes they are required to significantly strengthen their performance, like first loss guarantees, realistic return targets, and risk management. So here is this article talking about the state of Manipur. So in 10 years of METI's scheduled tribe demand, so METI forms a majority community in Manipur. So there are repeated pleas to the state and centers. So this was basically this incidence of the High Court of Manipur basically saying that issuing an order to give this scheduled tribe status to the METI community, which forms majority in the state. It led to fueling of the situation of instability in the state. So it was first demanded in 2012. Oh, that's there. So, who was Rani Durgavati Gaurav? So, basically, who was Rani Durgavati? There's like Gaurav Yatra in the state of Madhya Pradesh. So, who was this Gond queen? So, Rani Durgavati is said to have been born in 1524 in Mahoba's Chandela dynasty, known for building the famous Khajuraho temples. So, her father was Raja Sabhan of Rath and Mahoba, and she was married to Dalpat Shah, who is the son of the Gond king Sangram Shah of the kingdom of Garha Katanga. This kingdom included the Narmada Valley and the parts of northern Madhya Pradesh. And she was widowed in 1550, a few years after her marriage, and her young son Bir Narayan was on the throne in name, and she ruled the kingdom. So even when you read medieval Indian history, so one of the famous books by Satish Chandra describes her as a good marksman, skilled at using guns and bows and arrows. So it was noted that she was so intent on hunting tigers that whenever she heard a tiger had appeared, she did not drink water until she shot it. So according to the government documentation, the region's history, Durgavati and her generals, they managed the kingdom for 16 years. Then Abul Fazl, the court historian of Akbar, who chronicled these years in Akbarnama, also described Durgavati as a combination of beauty, grace, and man-like courage and bravery. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us in today's analysis session, and do subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and also hit the like button for this analysis video because it obviously takes a lot of efforts to come up with such analysis videos every day.